Hello and welcome to Haman Nature. I am Adam Haman. That spry, dapper-looking fella is Tyrone the Porcupine Hobo. Good day, sir.
Good day, sir. Are we going to do British? Is that what
we might?
G'day, mate. What's up? What's up, my fellow crony?
That's right. What's up, my cronies? You slipped into a Australian thing there, but I forgive you.
Don't question my accents. They're the best.
They are the best. You should have a Fargo one in your repertoire, right? Given your location.
Okay, it's a Minnesota accent. Even though the movie's called Fargo, the whole thing takes place in Minnesota. So I don't know what people are talking about.
Oh, I know I hit the bullseye with that reaction. You tell me all about it, Tyrone. Do it in the accent.
I actually never really liked that movie, but I really do enjoy the TV series that they've come out with lately.
Movie was great. First couple of seasons of the TV were great. After that, All right, well, enough of Minnesota pop culture, my friend. What are we talking about today?
Yeah, you betcha. We're going to talk about this article you wrote while we eat the hot dish.
He's flinging the interview.
Oofta. Oh, my.
Oofta.
Yeah, that's the way we talk in Minnesota, folks.
The Badger.
No, I know that you particularly, Adam, have one of those little bracelets, like those charm bracelets that people have, like they have the letters on them. Some say WWJD. Yours says WWBD. But I've got one that says WWWD. What would Walsh do? I mean, we've all got those, right? Obviously.
Mine's in the cleaner, but yes, of course.
All right, that's a little bit of an inside joke, folks. You might have to watch another episode to catch that one. But we're going to do a little bit of a reaction video today from when Matt Walsh was on the Tucker Carlson show. You and Bob Murphy on your crossover episodes briefly touched on this a little bit. We're going to do a little bit more in-depth based on an article you wrote on our Substack page, so you can find that HamanNature.com, and subscribing to Adam's newsletter is completely free. He writes 4 to 5 times a week. Even I jump in there occasionally. You'll probably want to skip those ones. But in this article you wrote, Matt Walsh thinks, just like the lefties he despises, that he's God. Dun 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 dun. So that's why I have the bracelet, and one of your sort of your headline sub-headlines is Trump is a ripple, the tsunami is still to come. So you kind of start with lefties. You say lefties have a tendency to shriek that Trump or anybody who disagrees with any of their insane government policies is literally Hitler, and trying to usher in the Handmaid's Tale or some equivalent hyperbolic hysteria. And I know a lot of people say stuff like that, and they almost think that must be hyperbole because they don't really know anyone that says that, because people that watch this show probably don't run in the circles of people that say those types of things. But at the Thanksgiving dinner table, prior or post-election, or maybe it wasn't Thanksgiving, can't remember last year, I had a cousin that said kind of the same thing. Those Republicans want to bring in the Handmaid's Tale, or whatever, right? So this stuff, while it's hyperbole, it's really in the culture there. And Adam, I think the point of your article is that you're worried that the right is now also falling into this hysteria that the left had been displaying.
Yeah, one of the earliest articles I wrote last year was about the pendulous nature of politics. Things tend to swing, from extreme left to extreme right and back again, at least in discordant times. When we're more sensible, there's less friction between the left and the right, culturally at least. But the last 15 years, the left has gone absolutely bonkers with identitarianism and wokeness and DEI and ESG. They got super authoritarian about it after the BLM thing and the COVID thing. And so one should expect a right-wing backlash to this. And you're your average lefty probably thinks that that's what Trump looks like. And they are really, really, really wrong. What it's going to look like is when people like Matt Walsh, who used to have some fairly libertarian tendencies, start thinking that no. What really needs to happen in response to the maniacal lefties is that the right needs to take control of the reins of power and tell everybody else how to live and give it to them good and hard. Not just set an example of the righteous way to live, but actually make sure that morality and the law are one. You're no longer free to be a good person or a not good person. We're going to force you to be a good person. And that is that's the Handmaid's Tale. You know, it's not whatever you're afraid of with Trump. You are causing people like, we've been talking about right-wing paternalism with Orrin Cass and Sagar. I forget the last name. Yeah, and there's been a bunch of others. Charlie Kirk, and yeah, left and right culturally can live in peace when you have a small government. But once you have a big one that's going to tell everybody how to act, we now have to fight over who gets to control it. And it breaks my heart, but people like Matt Walsh are just openly saying, yeah, why don't we grab government and force everybody into our worldview?
The thing that always makes me sort of giggle inside is just the irony of when somebody like my cousin makes a comment like that, or just anybody on the left in general. Worried that the right is going to usher in all of these moralistic codes of behavior into law and force us to obey a certain moral code. And of course, the irony is that the left is hyper moralistic.
Yeah.
If you're fearful of a moral code being imposed, it's not coming from the right, it's coming from the left. Look at all the speech laws they want to pass. The right think, you say something online, you should be canceled. If you don't support, not just say it's okay that it exists, but if you don't aren't there out supporting quote unquote left-wing causes, whether that's say a pride parade or teaching certain subjects in school, or protesting outside the Supreme Court when they took down Roe v. Wade. If you're not actively engaged in those sorts of things, you're evil and therefore should be excluded from society, thrown in prison, the key, thrown away. And so really, to say that the other side wants to impose a moral code is really the pot calling the kettle black. Both sides want to do this. And, your article, or you made the comment, morality and legality should be split, but that's not really correct. I know what you mean by that, but that's not really what anybody wants, because what you mean is, or from the libertarian perspective, is our morality is that we don't impose behavioral codes on others. That morality is a personal choice, and so we want a set of rules that allows people to exercise their personal choices so long as they don't harm others, versus the moral code of everyone has to go to church on a Sunday would be maybe an example. You see where I'm getting at. One is trying to force a behavior, and the other, the libertarian, is actually trying to protect behavior. We're trying to protect someone's ability to behave in the way they want to, rather than force them to behave the way we want them to behave.
The way I frame it, or try to in my mind, is the sphere of morality is enormous. It encompasses virtually every decision you make, every action you make.
Right.
Whether you should be polite to, your neighbor, that's a moral decision. It's not a legal decision. The sphere of legality is very, very, very small. It encompasses what the legal system should be, and we libertarians say it should be based on property rights as defined by our principles and the non-aggression principle. and then a whole bunch of things extrapolate from there. But none of them have to do with like politeness or how you treat your wife or what kind of car you drive. Or so the point being, all those things can be moral things. There's a moral dimension to action. Even in Robinson Crusoe, there's only one person there.
Mm-hmm.
You sleep all day, that's immoral in a sense, better, as opposed to being productive. So when I say there's a distinction between the two, I just mean that one should be tiny and narrow. The law should be narrow, only focused on aggression and stopping it. And morality is all pervasive. They're very different things.
And not to nitpick here, but when you use a word like the law should be narrow, the should is a moral clause. So again, there really is no separating legality from morality. It's just your moral code is going to determine what the legal framework is going to be. As a libertarian, my moral code is kind of live and let live. That's my moral code. But if I'm not a libertarian, if I'm a fascist, my moral code is going to be completely something different, and therefore the legal code I want to be is going to be something completely different. So I'm not really advocating for separation of morality and legality. What I'm advocating for is a libertarian morality that says we should allow basically the live and let live, and our legal code should moral statement reflect that. But that's a personal choice. And one more thought. Oh, go ahead.
That's not a contradiction to what I said.
Right.
One is a subset of the other.
Yeah,
morality
exactly.
is everything.
Yeah,
the law is super narrow.
And what was originally attractive for me about the left, anyway, or one of the things I liked most about the left, and still to this day, I guess, for however it holds true, was especially remember the late 80s, early 90s, you had the whole multicultural diversity movement, basically, especially in college campuses, to say, this culture is not superior to this other culture because there's no way to judge that. Everybody's societies are different and good and bad about both. And really what I liked about that was it respects personal decisions. Like, I'm not religious, but if somebody else is, great for them, and we can go on and live side by side. So I'm not judging anybody else for their moral positions. I respect everybody's right to have those positions. But something happened to the left, and I don't know if this was ever a truly heartfelt movement by them or ideology that people really embraced. It almost seems like it was such a brief flicker in sort of the educational system or the cultural movement that it almost feels artificial now that I look back on it, because it just didn't last. You don't really have multiculturalism spoken about the way it was back then 30 years ago. Whatever happened to that movement, it didn't hold for the left. And somehow they've gone what I can only describe as a neo-Puritanism, a neo-Puritan route. I really feel like for whatever their sexual revolution they had in the 50s and 60s, like they are the most anti-sex people, like the true leftists. They hate, they hate anything almost sexual. Like they're very puritanical. Like they don't, and again, good or bad, but like they don't like drinking or sex sort of things, and they don't like whatever thing. Like it almost like they just want to. They don't like meat or whatever it is. It's like they're very sort of strict in their way of thinking, and that'd be fine if they just kept it to themselves. But the minute they come across someone who eats meat or disagrees with some other position they might have, they get angry, like vehemently angry, and like attack, and the cancel culture arises, and then they pass all these laws, and I don't know, it's ironic.
Yeah, well, there was a lot there. I mean, I do remember, I was young, but I remember that multicultural moment when it seemed like everything was good and getting better. Free to be you and me, is the song I always think of when I think of like when things were just finally getting to be, we're all tolerant of one another. But I slightly disagree with what you said, because the point of living together peacefully with other cultures, assuming they're, not planning on slaughtering you or raping your women, assuming they're, agreeing to live and let live like you're living, is that it's not that you have to not judge other cultures. You can judge them. I think you're supposed to. But what you're not supposed to do is lay hands on them and force them to be a different way because of your opinion. And that is what the left violated. They violated that principle a long time ago if they ever had it. And that's what's so sad about what's happening to Matt Walsh, because now he's violating it too. Like when he talks about his values, he's deeply religious and he's oriented towards family and he's got a good work ethic. And there's probably a bunch of values I really share with him. But then he goes and commits the sin of thinking that because he's living the good life, he really ought to grab that ring of power that we hate so much and force everybody else to live like him, which demonstrates that he's not really virtuous at all, right? Tucker and Walsh, these other people, they always like to say the thing that's wrong with the left is they think they're playing God. They don't understand the limitations, of the nature of man. Well, you're not God either, guys. So quit thinking that it's virtuous for you to force other people into adopting your values and living life the way you think they ought to live. That is just as psychopathic and presumptuous as any lefty. You are only a man. You have your own opinions about what is virtuous. I happen to agree with them. And when you're committed to using force for the good of other people, for their benefit, it's particularly pernicious. There's a quote by C.S. Lewis. I quoted it in my article. Of all the tyrannies, a tyranny sincerely exercised for the good of its victims may be the most oppressive. It would be better to live under robber barons than under omnipotent moral busybodies. The robber baron's cruelty may sometimes sleep. His cupidity may at some point be satiated. But those who torment us for our own good will torment us without end, for they do so with the approval of their own conscience, unquote. And the left has been showing us their version, and now the right wants to show us their version, and they're both awful.
You're a smart man when you use a word like cupidity.
Cupidity.
C.S. Lewis, man, the dude was a freaking genius.
Yep, he's the man.
Well, to demonstrate your point here, or the theme of your article, let's dive into a clip from Tucker Carlson's show.
All righty.
You on marijuana?
I think it's awful. I think it's terrible. I used to have a more kind of libertarian view of it.
Yeah.
If you were to go back 10 years, 15 years, my view was I don't like it personally, but...
You were never a weed smoker?
I've had it. I've never been years and years and years ago, not in adulthood. It's not for me. It's not for me. And my view used to be, well, it's not for me, but probably all this, I kind of bought into the war on drugs thing, and all this money that we're spending to try to stop people from smoking it is a waste. And so it should probably just be legal, even if I don't like it. There's this argument from the marijuana fans that, well, it's no different from than alcohol. And we know how prohibition of alcohol worked out. And so if we're going to allow people to go out and get a drink, why shouldn't they be able to go
Worked
out?
out pretty well, I think. I think cirrhosis deaths went way down, didn't they? I mean, they did.
Yeah. So I'm not convinced by the argument for that reason. I'm also not entirely convinced that alcohol and marijuana are comparable. For one thing, and alcohol can be really bad, and there's addiction, and it can destroy families and lives. Alcohol is, though, at least a more social, it's a social lubricant.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're with a group of people and you're having a drink, it can help you kind of loosen up. You have a better time, as long as you're not being excessive. Now, if somebody gets trashed, then it kind of ruins the time for everyone, and that can happen. I think marijuana is not like that. It kind of turns you inward. It makes you antisocial, So if you're sitting around a table with some people and a couple of them are drinking a beer, even if you're not drinking, you can have a perfectly nice time. But if you're sitting around a table and a couple of the people are stoned, it's like it's lame. You don't even want to talk to that person. They have nothing to contribute.
Yeah. Does seem to isolate people.
Yeah, I think it's isolating. I think it turns you inward.
So let's pause it here. The thing that drives me absolutely nuts is people who never touch the stuff, never don't use it, are trying to tell us what it's like to use it. Go F yourself, dude. First of all, I got to do cheers right now. Cheers. Social lubricant. And I take a fair share of other substances as well. And let me tell you, it's a lot of fun and a very social experience. So I don't know where these guys are getting off. Like, it's the same thing, though, if I was at a party and somebody gets totally wrecked and hammered. It's like they're not going to be interacting or socializing with it's almost as if they feel like you take one puff of a joint and now you're just stoned. Like you just take one sip of a beer and you're wasted.
Dude,
that's not how it works, dude. It's not how it works.
It's literally reefer madness. That stupid propaganda movie. I drink from time to time. I enjoy marijuana much, much less often, but I have. And I know a ton of people who do it recreationally, routinely.
Yeah,
and Matt Walsh isn't describing their behavior at all.
Exactly.
Not even close. It's literally that dumb reefer madness movie over and over again. But who cares? That's beside the point. So he wants to use the ring of power to prohibit a behavior, and he doesn't know anything about it. Fine. What grinds my gears is he's revealing to us that he's basically just a lefty progressive.
Mm-hmm.
Just like the person who wants to take away your meat or your gas vehicle because they've got it's bad for society after all, and they've got reasons. Just like Matt here has reasons. I'll tell you why it's better for society if we all have electric vehicles and are all vegetarians. He's got this opinion, and he wants to use guns and jails and prosecutors in order to enforce everybody else to live according to his opinions. That's called a progressive, Matt Walsh. What the hell happened to you, guy?
I don't know, man. Well, let's let these eruditions enlighten us some more.
You got it.
With some of their Roni stories.
But regardless of all that, my opinion was, yeah, it should probably just be legal. But I also believe in when you get new data, you get new facts, you need to analyze them. You need to be willing to change your mind. And so we have legalized it in many places across the country, in many cities. And I've been to these cities, as many of us have, where weed is now, it's like cigarettes were 30 years ago. Everybody's smoking. And I think the early returns are not good.
You don't think Denver and New York are pretty great?
I really don't. I think they're it's quite terrible. It's not all because of weed, but just the experience of walking around, everybody's high, it reeks of weed everywhere. How is this?
Okay, couple of points here, because I can't just hold myself here. So, the last comment there, it reeks of weed everywhere. That is a little bit true. If you walk downtown Minneapolis, certain areas, or actually any time of the day, you always smell something somewhere, right? Okay, agreed. I don't particularly like the smell of it either. You might not like the smell of garbage either. We have rules for this. We have regulations. We have ordinances, right? So
Dude.
It's a matter of things not being enforced. And again, I know if we were going to be in Ancapistan, you would have property rights. And the person that owned the property could say, you're allowed to have the smell. And another person would probably say, nope, you can't have that smell over here. So, I mean,
In Ancapistan,
that's not an objection to legalizing something.
Right. In Ancapistan, we don't know how these things would shake out. And if he were speaking in terms of property rights and a pollution effect due to odor,
right.
Well, that would be one thing, but he's not.
Right.
He's saying, I, Matt Walsh, personally don't like this smell. Therefore, it's bad for society.
Right.
Therefore, it should be illegal.
My cousin grows his own stuff, smokes every day. He loves the smell of it. Loves it. He thinks it's the greatest smell ever. You're telling him because you don't like the smell of it, he shouldn't be allowed to do that in his own home. Go F off, dude. And the problem is you're smelling it in the cities. Well, what is the city but a bunch of public property?
Mm-hmm.
You don't have these issues in neighborhoods. If I'm smoking weed and it wafts over into my neighbor's yard and into their window, they're going to come say something to me or complain to the homeowners association or something like that. But when you're on a public street in a city, who owns it? Who makes the rules? Whatever. I mean, so these are property rights issues, not what's good or bad for society issues.
Yeah,
I mean,
ideally, these things would all be handled privately by the owner. And if it's handled, go ahead.
I was just going to say, you know what, Adam? I don't like the smell of garbage. Therefore, we should outlaw landfills because they're stinky and smelly. And every time I drive by one, it makes me gag. So no more landfills. Like, I don't even know where to go from here, man. But sorry,
You can
what
you
else?
can
what
sort of
else is he
see.
saying?
I mean, if the government wasn't involved, you can see these things working themselves out
Yeah.
as social preferences change over time. Like forget a city street, because that's public property and it's just screwed because of it, because we have the political process deciding everything. But what if it was like one of those jumbo shopping malls that's all private property? You've got a bunch of different store owners, you've got the property owner, you've got a bunch of customers that change every day. They're not always the same composition, and they all have different preferences as to whether they like cigarette smoke or pipe smoke or marijuana smoke or no smoke or vape smoke or strong perfume. If it's all private, all that stuff gets handled by contract and free association as people show what their preferences, what they like, what they're willing to tolerate, what they're not willing to tolerate. Prices are literally change. If you set the wrong rules as the mall owner, the value of your properties goes down because nobody wants to shop there. All these things can be handled in a non-coercive way. But for former libertarian-leaning Matt Walsh, that's not good enough anymore. I don't like the smell, and besides, it makes people non-social, according to my weird understanding of what marijuana is. So therefore, it must be illegal.
Plus, his statement is, we've legalized it now for several years, and I don't think the early results have been good. Have you been to Denver and New York? They're terrible. What? How are you connecting one to the other? As if the legalization of marijuana, quote-unquote legalization, I'll get to that in just a second, 5-10 years ago, all of a sudden turn these wonderful gleaming cities into cesspools? Give me a break, dude. Oh, but he did clarify it hasn't all been weed legalization. What about all the benefits that have come from quote unquote legalization of weed? Tax revenue. Okay, hold on, libertarians. How about less gang crime? I think that's gone down. In these areas, maybe not. I mean, whatever. The war, like okay, maybe let's take your worst case example. It makes everybody's gonna do it. Everybody's gonna get hooked on it. Everybody from 2-year-olds to 92-year-olds, and it's gonna make us all lazy and lethargic. Is that worse than gang people shooting at each other in the street? I mean, as we always say in economics, there are no solutions. There's only trade-offs, man. It's like weed is around. People want to do weed. And you just admitted prohibition is not good. So, I mean, you can't have a perfect world. You can't have a perfect world. Perfection doesn't exist. Stop it.
I feel Matt here is just being willfully blind, obstinate. As if the problem with all these cities in California, or what happened in Oregon recently with their experiment of legalizing a bunch of drugs, kind of, in Denver, he's not really pointing to the drug use or the fact that it's legal. He's pointing to all these other obvious crimes that none of us really object to, that the government is just ignoring, like pooping in the street. They're not doing anything to stop that. Camping in the street. They're not doing anything to stop that. California famously, like he would say, all this drug use leads to people losing their jobs, leads to poverty, leads to crime. Well, you've got these places that are making any crime up to $950 or something, just a slap on the wrist. And so why in the world are you excoriating a victimless crime and pointing as the problem all these things that are actual crimes? You shouldn't be able to poop on on the city streets. And so why don't we just enforce that rule rather than, I think weed causes a little bit more of this, so let's make weed illegal.
Also, it hasn't been legalized. Tell me any other product that's quote unquote been legalized, but I can't take credit cards at my business for it.
Right.
I can't have a regular bank account. Everything's got to be done in cash. What does that sound like? Something that's been legalized? It's regulated. You got to get licenses to open up these stores. It's taxed. It's not legal. Everything in this country is controlled. Full legalization, no taxes, no regulation. A lot of people after Reagan, quote unquote, deregulated the airlines in the 80s. Like, see all these years later, you got terrorists and long lines and bad service and high prices and these airlines that are gouging you. Okay, great, fine. There's still regulations. There's still an FAA. There's still taxes. There's still tariffs. There's still all this other stuff. There's still the government controlling the skies, and they deregulated the airlines, but they didn't deregulate the airports. Last I checked, airports were pretty important to the air traffic system. So it's these half measures over and over and over again that people say, see what happens when you deregulate something or
to the
legalize
point that,
something? Well, it's a disaster because when you only do it in a half measure, you never give it a chance to succeed. It's going to fail. And then the fascists or socialists or communists can come back and just say, see, we need more government control all along.
Dude, you're exactly right. Half measures prove the opposite of what you think they prove. And California's the perfect example. Weed is legal there. And our economic theory tells us that when that's the case, you should get decrease in violence because gangs are no longer involved, because why would they be? They can't compete with a legitimate store owner. But the taxes and the regulations are so high in California that the black market in marijuana is thriving.
Right.
It's thriving.
Right.
So talk about a half measure. You accomplish nothing except, I guess, raise more taxes from the poor citizens who like this product. All right, let's continue because I think Tucker and Matt are going to turn not just lefty progressive, but full postmodernist here in a second.
Made anyone's life better? That's my question. That's what I want to know. I'd be willing to adjust my view on this. And I've asked this question before. I haven't gotten a satisfactory answer. But we've made weed legal in a lot of these places. In what way has it measurably improved life anywhere now that it's legal?
Well, I don't know. I mean, it's degraded people to the point where they're very easy to control. Don't you think that's an upside? So if you're like running a criminal enterprise posing as a government and you don't want people to rebel violently against you, then you give them drugs so they won't.
And if I was in a position of power politically, then maybe I'd feel that way. But for me,
I mean, that does like take 3 steps back. Like, what is this? The whole population is like addled with something, Ladies are on benzos, the kids are on amphetamines, the young men are on weed.
Yeah.
Like, no one's in his right mind, but everybody's kind of grooving out to his own music, and testosterone levels have just...
I wonder if either of these guys have looked at the world we're living in. Who wants to be sober for this dumpster fire that we're in?
Good point. I was about to pause it, too, because he asks a question, how is the world a better place because people are allowed to smoke weed? Which is just such a retarded question. How is the world a better place because you're allowed to wear plaid shirts, Matt? There's a huge meta benefit to people living in a free society, allowed to exercise those freedoms without risk of some authoritarian jerk-off literally pulling a gun or sending an army of people with guns out there to force you to not wear that plaid shirt anymore. I personally think society is made a much worse place by people wearing plaid shirts. I can prove scientifically with this study by the Non-Plaid Institute of Non-Pladery that it makes some people throw up and it causes accidents because it's so distracting for automotive drivers. But the point being, he just asks these goofy questions like, I don't think weed is socially beneficial, and therefore I should be able to strip everybody of the right to partake in it. And not, this is supposed to be an educated man. Does he not see any positive benefit in living in a free society versus a totalitarian state who's governed by Matt Walsh's worldview? That's insane.
And it always comes from these sort of... Now, look, I respect both these guys in a lot of ways, especially I think what Tucker's doing is great for the intellectual contribution, but I would not want to party or hang out with either of these guys. They seem like some fuddy-duddies. I'm sorry. Their idea of a good time is probably, I don't know, sitting around a campfire telling ghost stories or something. Like, no. I like to have a party when I go party. So it's like, well, it's. And by the way, if either of these guys want to come over to my house one day, I'll show them a good time. But it's almost as if they have this. They don't come out right and say it, but it has to be an implicit premise. That is, freedom is good up to a point, right?
And I'll tell you right where. And I'll tell you right where it is.
And I'll tell you where to draw that line. Like from a libertarian perspective, How does this make society better? Well, it makes them more free, and freedom is better, period. It's that simple for us. Again, better is subjective. It's just, and there's trade-offs in everything. You can't have a perfect world. So it's like either you're for freedom 100% or you're not. And if you're not for freedom, then you're not on.
Then you're a tyrant.
You're a tyrant.
Which again, they're going to display here very shortly.
You don't get to tell me what to do, man. You don't get to tell me what to do.
The floor, and so probably not going to have an insurrection when everyone's high, right?
Yeah, it makes people compliant. It makes them apathetic, even more than I think people just sort of naturally are these days. And of course, in reality, these are all bad things. So it kind of goes back to, how has it made anyone's life better? And
right.
And I don't know. I'm a simple person. Maybe I can be guilty of being simplistic sometimes. So if that's the case, then guilty as charged. But to me, it's like, I think a policy is bad if it makes people's lives worse and doesn't improve anything.
What if it works in theory? What if it's a beautiful theory?
Well, theories are great. Then we can talk about it. Then it's a lot of fun to talk about.
It's like that famous the de Gaulle line, which I think is probably fake. We know it works in practice. The question is, does it work in theory?
Yeah.
And you feel like that's in operation in the United States. It's like, well, people have the right to X, Y, or Z, therefore we're doing this. And it's like, actually, that's a disaster. But people have a right. You know what I mean? It's like there's no reference point in reality there. It's just like the theory makes sense. Let's go with it.
Yeah.
And I really hate getting into these types of things. Like, how does it make anybody's life better? Just because you don't know anybody or haven't taken 5 minutes to pull up any research of how marijuana helps a lot of people.
Right.
I'm a nervous flyer. I take a gummy before I fly. It relaxes me, makes the flight much better and enjoyable. I had a friend who's terrified to fly, couldn't do it, went to therapy. Again, the gummies help her with that, and she's able to travel. I have another friend who went through chemotherapy. Awful. Marijuana helped her through that. I mean, and it's just like, fine, take that stuff aside. It's used in a low dose, in a quote unquote responsible way. But just like drinking, you can have a little bit of it. It takes the edge off of work. It relaxes you. It is a social lubricant. I don't know where these guys went to, and like everybody's just stoned and not interacting with each other. That's just there's ways to use everything, good and bad. But the thing itself is not good or bad. It's an object. It's the same argument with guns, right? It's like, it's a thing. How you use it is what makes it good or bad. And I don't know. As long as, and again, the libertarian principle is, as long as you don't harm anybody else, you should have the freedom to do it. Now, what they're going to say is the Matt Walsh types can say, but it does harm other people. It ruins families, and it does this, and it does that. So we have to be very careful when we use words like harm, because it can either have a very narrow or a very wide definition. For libertarians, we typically mean harm to physical property. We don't really include emotional harm, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean the legal definition.
Yeah.
Being rude to your children is causing them harm, but it's technically legal. Right. Or your spouse. Yeah, I mean, they're just about to get into their silly understanding of what rights are, which just breaks my heart. Here we go.
And that's why I increasingly, when people start talking about their rights, it doesn't mean a lot to me. I don't even know what people mean when they say it. I'm not trying to be pedantic, but the next time someone says, well, I have a right to this, just ask them, well, what do you mean you have a right to it? What does that mean?
Oh, I know.
They aren't kidding, guys, and it doesn't get better from there. These people are literally post-modernists now. They don't understand what rights mean. And, of course, if you don't think people have rights, then what is going to stop you from using your government power to do whatever the goddamn hell you want to them? You can restrict them in any way because rights aren't even a thing. That's just a word, which, again, it's postmodernism. Concepts don't exist. Words don't have meaning. I mean, that's just a colonial construction of the word. It's lefty nonsense. And again, talking about that pendulum swinging thing, this is exactly how the left talks. Anybody can construct a narrative in their head for why their version of authoritarianism is really good. And rights are a very useful concept to have lurking in the not only the legal structure but the zeitgeist, to say, oh yeah, but I do have an impediment here. I can't force that person to get out of that ridiculous plaid shirt because he has the right to wear that. I don't, or more correctly stated, I don't have the right to stop him from doing that.
Yeah, and Matt, if all you're doing is walking around the street asking 20-year-olds who watch the Kardashians what a right is, yeah, they're not going to give you an answer. Give me a call. I'll explain what rights are, what they are exactly, and why I have them and why I don't. So, how do you not have a theory of rights? I don't.
Because it's inconvenient now. Because I want to oppress people.
Well, no. Even if your theory of rights says that the citizens don't have rights, the government does. Fine. Everybody has a theory of rights. He does too. This is so bullshit. I don't even know what people mean by the word rights. Give me a break. You're implicitly saying that the government has a right to make a law to do something.
Right. Well, actually, we could help him here, and maybe we could help him find his Christianity, because we do say it. The shorthand we use is incorrect.
Right.
I have a right to wear my dumb plaid shirt. That's not strictly speaking true. The true way to say that, because rights are negative, is you and nobody else here in this country or anywhere else in the universe has a right to stop me from wearing that plaid shirt. You don't have that right. And since you don't have it, you can't assign it to your legislator either. That is an abrogation, and as a good Christian, he ought to know better. Again, I think these people are they're mirroring the left that they hate so much into giving themselves godlike powers over other men. And boy, that's unfortunate. Let's move on to the third section here.
If you were in control of what people on Twitter debated, what would they be debating right now?
Everything we talked about for the first, hour of this conversation is what, like, let's talk about the war on the family, on marriage, things that affect our kids. How do we raise healthy, happy kids? Let's talk about that. Any of these issues. There's like serious, deep cultural issues in our country
Yes.
is what we should be talking about, in my mind.
You feel like it's very hard to go from affluence to less affluence. It's very hard to move backward. It's like hard for the human brain to deal with it, but it's possible. You feel like the United States could become significantly poorer, not poor, but less rich than it is now, and still remain cohesive and happy people with meaningful lives who love their neighbors and their spouses and their children. But you're not going to do that without families. You can't do that if people are living in studio apartments by themselves with their cats. Like, that's just not going to happen, right?
Right.
So I just think objectively that's the most important issue. Why isn't it the topic of discussion or debate? And why did the Republican Party shunt aside social conservatives like circus freaks for 40 years? Like, what was that?
I'll tell you why. Because of everything Matt Walsh was just talking about there. They have this idea of what good and virtuous behavior is supposed to be, and they might be right. But virtue becomes a vice the second you insist on the right to force other people to adopt your virtues. Like going to church, I'm an atheist, but I can see how going to church can be a good and virtuous thing in your life. But it's not good and virtuous to force other people to go to church. You see how bringing force into the equation violates the natural rights of man given to us by our creators, in the words of every Christian I'd ever heard of prior to this right authoritarian snapback of the last couple of years?
Is that a question for me? Asking the audience. I will say this. So I'm not a natural rights theorist. I think that theory is completely wrong. But actually, similar to Plato's paradox, it works really well against the someone with a religious mindset, especially like a Christian mindset, because you do have this God-given rights, right? And God bestowed upon man. It's in the Declaration of Independence. You have a inherent right to life, liberty, blah blah blah, whatever. So that argument can work well, especially against somebody like Matt Walsh to say, well, God gave me a right to be free, didn't he? So I don't know. It seems like an easy retort, but maybe we should have do an episode on rights theory. We can
we
hash
should
out our different opinions on it.
Just super brief, because we don't have time for it here. But I don't believe in God, but I do think we have natural rights. I think it's our task to discover what those are, and it's the point of the show, really. Our species has a nature, and there is a legal system which minimizes conflict over scarce resources in accordance with our nature and the nature of this planet. And I think that non-aggression principle is critical to that legal structure. And I don't think it's accidental or arbitrary. If we don't use a legal structure like property rights, freedom of association, and the non-aggression principle, or something a lot like it, then we are going to descend into just fighting over things. And our species can do that. We've mostly done that over most of our history. But the period of relative prosperity and peace that we happen to be in now is because we adopted this concept of rights, and I do think they're natural. But we should have that debate on a later episode. We're throwing arrows at Matt Walsh today.
All right, Adam. Well, if people want to read more about your in-depth commentary on topics like this and others, where can they go?
They should go to HamanNature.com, HAMAN, or HamanNature.substack.com. 5 days a week, you either get podcasts or articles that I write, which some say are illuminating. And if you love the show and want us to keep doing it rather than descend into poverty and filth and squalor and probably drug and alcohol problems, consider becoming a paid subscriber so me and the porcupine here can keep doing this. So that's all, HamanNature.com. Thank you, Tyrone, for another educational and inspiring episode. I learned a lot. And thank you, ladies and gentlemen. We'll catch you next time on Haman Nature.
WWWD.